Hi, everyone. How are you? Everybody unmute themselves and say hello.
Hello.
Hi, Willow. Nice to see you.
Hi.
You are all in for such a treat today as we get to talk to Melissa Waggener Zorkin, one of the most highly regarded and most accomplished communications professionals we know. But I just wanted to get a chance to say hi to all of you before we welcome her formally and let you all say hi to each other.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Oh, Jim Yoder's here. Hello, Jim Yoder. Nice to see you.
Oh, my.
Oh my, well, lovely to see you all. I'll let you all go on mute. We will make sure, as always, that we have plenty of time for your questions. We are thrilled to welcome Melissa Waggener Zorkin, CEO and founder of We Communications, which, as you all know, is a global public relations and integrated marketing communications firm that is women-founded, women-led, and purpose-driven. We Communications focuses on three sectors: healthcare, consumer, and technology. And their purpose, as they describe it, is to use the gift of communication to move people to positive actions for clients and for the world. And today, it is very clear that we are experiencing demands for actions, demands for positive change in ways we have never experienced before. And in her own firm and in their client-facing work, Melissa is a powerful advocate for purpose-driven action and purpose-driven communication. And she's going to share some of her experiences with us today. Melissa, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here and, of course, to talk with you almost in person. And let me welcome everybody. It is so great to have all of you here today. And I know you could have done something else with your time, so thank you very, very much.
Melissa, we are calling this series The Message, the Medium, the Moment. And you have been a communications professional for decades. So how would you characterize this moment right now?
I love this moment, and most people would wonder why I answered that way, but I think that this is a moment in time where communications is one of the most powerful tools and quite frankly, facilitators of the things we need to get done in this world. I really, really do. And when people say, wow, how does it feel to run a company during this time? I say, yes, it's very difficult. There are a lot of challenges that are new and different, but this is the time. This is our time to make a huge difference. And I can tell you, Willow, that our clients are ready for that too.
So one of the things that you've said, and by the way, just mining your Twitter feed alone for pearls of wisdom is something that I would recommend that everybody on this call do. But you said that communications and the ability to do it well now is a business imperative. Is that more true today than it's been?
I think that the phrase communications is part of every leader's toolbox has been true forever. I think, though, when the times are like they are today with everything swirling around us, that clarity and energy are two of the most important things we can give people. And so, of course, in these times when it's confusing and when we're all probably somewhat frustrated in various ways, being able to communicate and express what you stand for, what you're feeling, and why you're doing something could not be more important. And we're able to actually give this kind of advice to the C-suite now. I think that there is more readiness, if you will, than ever before to actually sit and understand, okay, so part of my job is actually to be a great communicator and to really first start with my employees, by the way, in terms of what are they wanting me to communicate.
You wear a lot of different hats. Your firm does an enormous amount of research, and you really understand what consumers expect of brands and what brands need to be doing better. You are a leader of your own communications firm, so you're running a business. You're communicating internally with your own employees, and you're advising brands and leaders. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to try to touch upon all of those different hats that you wear. Also mindful of the fact that as you know, Annenberg students study journalism, they study public diplomacy, they study communication, and they study public relations and advertising. And I'm wondering if I want to ask you about something you said about the public relations industry. It's important to be creative, right? We think a lot about creating messages, creating campaigns, distributing campaigns, but you said it's important to be creative, but to creative to what end? The PR industry needs to focus on moving people to action. So in this moment that is so much a call to action, how should students be thinking about the PR industry's role as moving people to action?
First of all, I'm glad that people on this call care so much and want to be in this industry, because we desperately need you. And I think that we have to go back to a fundamental premise that at the end of the day, and it's not just in today's times, people want to understand what you want them to do, what should happen differently, what change should really be motivated by good communications. And so I think that that is really the call to action, is just figuring out how to express ourselves in a way that actually will move people to take action, to check their action, to use data to support their action, and then agility matters here, to course correct as fast as they can. Because in today's world, data matters a lot. And so you take that data, you translate that, you go for broke with your messaging, but if you're not right, you just take the feedback, and again, you turn and you make sure that you're actually following the data. So I think that it's a great time to be in communications, and I hope that all of you feel that way too.
I feel like I've been taking that, if you get it wrong, take the data, integrate it, and do it again message to heart a lot these days, as we're all pivoting as frequently as we are. I would love for you to share a little bit of your research on brands and what consumers expect of brands. Your data suggests that over the past couple of years, consumers have dramatically increased their expectations for brands to take a stand on important issues. What is the research telling us?
We actually have done a lot of research, and it's not just been in the last 2 years, but rather over a period of time when we've really been focusing on brands and the need for purpose. And that the fact is, it's an imperative for purpose actually to rise to the top even more often than profit. So the first thing that the data is telling us, even over the years, is how the exponential increase for consumers to understand and have a relationship with the people that they deal with and have a similar set of values, that has been there for a while. And then in the last 2 years, the research is telling us now purpose is even more important than financial expectations and financial goal setting. And so what that tells me is that businesses have this great, almost like a perch where they can say, we need to be the leaders in the world. We need to take this really seriously. We need to figure out what are the world's direst problems, and then how can we really, really make a difference and make a dent in it, and pivot our innovation towards the greatest, thorniest problems.
And for businesses, what do we know about businesses that do that well, that act with purpose and meaning?
I want to say here that this just makes me smile, Willow, that I think that businesses have such an opportunity today. Well, they've always had it, but it's even more important today to really fundamentally pivot, who they are, be clear on who they are, start with their purpose, listen to their employees, and all then together unify around what should the company really change in the world. And it's partly activism, but it's also very business driven in terms of, let's be sure that we pick the one thing that we're really, really good at, and then the business can actually help drive that change in the world. And we are so fortunate to have some of the best clients who do this in their sleep. And they really, really fundamentally at their core believe that they have to be part of societal change. And so I do have some really great examples of that. And we've, again, had that honor to partner with them. And I think the fundamental, to your question, Willow, is this is not really a communications conversation first. This is first and foremost, what's at the core of the company's decision making, and how will they run their purpose through every piece of the organization. So communications does come in there, but that's at a different point. That's at the point where the expression is happening. So first is a fundamental belief of who you are, what you do, and what you can change.
So that's what, when you talk about brands using your purpose as a guide for determining how to act, where to position their resources, first and foremost defines who they are, and then you help them tell their story.
We have had partnerships with the clients that we've worked with forever, and we have this fortunate position to be in on the ground floor with the idea generation and to help them really see what really they can do that's better than anyone else. And I think often communications, all of you out there in communications, you know that there are often people who want to say 1,000 things. And I think our job as communicators is to help a company, a business, maybe focus down into it's these 3 things that you're really, really good at. It's these 3 things that you can also sign up for this year and next year and in a sustainable way. So our job is at the whole range, the internal piece with understanding the employees, and then the goal setting and the purpose setting, and then of course the communications piece. And I'll tell all of you out there that this doesn't happen overnight. When you enter this field, it does take a long time to build up a relationship with your clients. But once you've done that and you get in that trusted advisor capacity, then you have an opportunity to really be the most impactful we can be.
So, Melissa, I know you don't normally share your work with clients, but you've actually brought an example to share with us today in Microsoft. And particularly around their announced goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2030, you help them communicate this moonshot as you described it.
Yes.
So can you share some of that with us?
I can, and it is a moonshot. I mean, again, to my point about having an excellent set of clients, we've worked with Microsoft for years, and I always consider them bold and very challenging also in terms of keeping us on our game. And so what Microsoft set out to do was to be bold and different. And it's not only a carbon neutral position that they wanted to take, it's a moonshot of going carbon negative. And when you talk about what carbon negative means, it basically means they're going to wipe out all the carbon that the brand has actually emitted since its founding. And I think that was in 1976. So this is an example of a company that's really raising the bar and thinking about not just we'll announce it, but how will we do it? And how will every part of our company unify around that missive, that moonshot? And so it's not a communications declaration that they've made. It's a company challenge, and it is something that I firmly believe they will achieve as well.
And you've worked with them for a long time. Can you characterize your role in helping them clarify or map out their action plan that served as the foundation for your communication? How do those conversations work?
I mentioned earlier that partnership is really at the fundamental base of everything that we do, because you have to achieve trust in order to really get to the bottom of what the voice should be, what should really the steps be. I think that our company firmly always begins at what I say, start at the start. And so with Microsoft and everyone else too, we start at the fundamental place of what is the reason we're doing this? What is the why? What is the thing that motivates us, and why do we do what we do every day when we get up? And with Microsoft and others, we basically say, let's first just spend some time in that. And then we talk about what is the change we would like to see. And then we begin talking about, now, how will we do it? And before, again, we ever talk about communications, we talk about how is it going to be done? Can we sustain it? Will it actually be something that we can unify the company around? And so that's a very long-term approach. And I call that kind of building the epic versus just the episode. I think a lot of you know that we can get a lot of short-term wins in communications just like that. And that's an episode, but it's important when you're with companies and you truly know that they want to drive from their purpose and make a societal change, that this has to be sustainable. It has to be long-term. You have to be building an epic. And so that is something that we would, I think, have a process for, Willow, but also just basically it's grounded in the trust we have with our organizations.
I know that you've brought some of that work to show us. I'm wondering if you could sort of put that in the right context for us.
Yes, I do have a video here. It's, I think, a little bit long, but it's also well worth looking at, which starts at the start fundamentally and then takes you through the announcement. So I think it's you, Reggie or Jim, that can go ahead and play that for us, please.
Across the globe, sustainability has been top of mind for governments, nonprofits, and businesses focused on building a future without runaway greenhouse emissions.
The scientific consensus is clear. The world today is confronted with an urgent carbon crisis.
And in 2020, Microsoft became the first major company to set a bold goal of becoming carbon negative and announced a detailed plan to achieve it.
By 2050, we will remove from the environment all of the carbon that Microsoft has emitted, either directly or for electrical consumption, since we were founded in the year 1975.
The company also committed $1 billion to fund new climate innovations and solutions. To teach what it means to go from carbon neutral to carbon negative, we had to get real about carbon math and help audiences understand how Microsoft will hold itself accountable to the carbon pledge.
We deeply understand this is just a fraction of what is needed to solve this problem.
The news sparked interest and debate from business, finance, science, technology, and policy audiences. Microsoft's commitment to transparency struck the right tone, particularly with journalists and those focused on climate change, inspiring those who can move faster and go further to do so. And the audience grew. The announcement made at a signature event on Microsoft's Redmond campus won news coverage around the world and billions of impressions on social media.
I don't think it's an understatement at all to say that this is the biggest technological goal, the biggest economic objective in the history of humanity. It will require all of us to do more.
We hope you will join us on this journey, because each of us must commit to do more in order for us to collectively achieve more.
Well, thank you for playing that. And, you know, I think the three things to remember is they started with the data, fundamentally, rigor. What is it going to take? And be clear on the action. Second, what's the unifying strategy across the company? You know, the whole company needed to believe it, not just a calm strategy. And finally, you saw that in the video, the key business leaders were all involved and they all believed in it and they were all there and they were all devoted to communications and making sure that they were part of the announcement.
It was internal, but it was also clearly external in that they were not just driving change at Microsoft, but the goal is really to drive change more broadly. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a pretty audacious goal. You know, how do you help advise a company or a brand to position itself effectively to move change beyond its own institution?
This is where you fundamentally get into being an advisor that is hardcore and very direct about what the company is good at and being very clear on what the data tells. Sometimes it's not what the company likes to hear, and being very clear on how something is already being perceived and bringing that context into the organization. And again, it's not always what companies want to hear, but we have to start with that fundamental shift of actually just when you get into it, what needs to change and what's the rigor that we really need to put around it. And so we do find ourselves often in that position of kind of holding this up and saying, this is it. This is really where you are. And I think that companies today especially are more ready than ever to really be part of these really large, fundamental changes that we need in the world today.
And going forward, how does Microsoft, and then how do you as a communicator kind of assess progress And, as you say, we're living in an age of brand accountability. Hooray for that. How do you make sure that Microsoft is living up to those standards of accountability?
I'm not, as a communications professional, the chief person who would feed back to the organization how the entire business has, aligned around a moonshot like this. My portion is to be certain that what we said we're going to do and where we will do is actually held to from the standpoint of, checking with individuals, checking and feeding it back like, wait a minute, and holding them accountable for that. But it's more, the CEO actually has to be involved with big things like this or it won't work. And so fundamentally we're in the loop, but we're not driving the whole loop. That wouldn't be the right comms position. That said, though, the closer you are to your clients and the closer you are to actually fundamentally driving and designing a strategy, the more often you're able to, with agility, say, I really think we're going to need to do this differently, and you'll really have that position. But the metrics are there, the KPIs are there, year after year, we examine it. We're very hardcore about that in terms of not just the expression and the announcement, but year after year, what's the sustainable epic that we're truly building? And that's something that we do in great partnership. And the data is our friend there because it's always actually telling us, here is really how we're coming across, here's where we're falling down. And quite frankly, here's the feedback loop that is so necessary to do really good communications.
And yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply that you were the chief accountability officer for a company, but more that if you're helping to design this epic, as you describe it, how do you make sure that your communication is reflecting accurately both progress made and potentially hurdles discovered or, in some cases, a slowdown in progress? And, how do you think about evolving that epic over time?
Yes, I think in the old days, which I guess some of us now would say, well, that was actually February, but I digress. In the old days, we used to be able to write a plan, run the play, and maybe 3 months later take a look at the play. That's not the case today. We're actually using predictive analytics to see where things are moving. We're actually using data in real time all the time to see how our programs are landing. We're also, from the standpoint of a lot of what our company does, we also are very tied to a lot of the influentials and the stakeholders, and so we'll also do a lot of qualitative work too to feed back into that feedback loop. And again, you have to realize that a client is at their best when they really immerse themselves in the fundamental, let's call it practice or discipline of communications, where they want to see how it came across, where they want to improve, where they want to be agile and get better. And so that's something we just keep putting in front of them and work on it, on a daily basis, really.
Can you give us a sense in a little more detail of what that kind of data-driven, what those feedback mechanisms look like from your vantage point? Are you doing qualitative research? Are you doing interviews? What kind of predictive analytics are you using? Just give us a window.
Well, of course, we have a measurement system that we've developed and has pieces of the strategic part has the proprietary aspect, but also is grounded in all the data that's out there. And anyone can go get a lot of the data that's out there. You all know where it is. You live in it every day. And of course, our ad is the strategy on top of it in terms of analyzing it and taking it from big data to small data and then playing that back and saying, see, this is how this really worked. And so, those tools are out there, but our role is really to analyze it, to feed that back in and make sure that everybody understands just what's happened in real time. And there are also, and I know this is, to you all living in data because this is actually the way you are going to school and doing all of your work. There are actually, I think, fundamental changes in the way we're looking at data now where we're basically saying, even before something's happened, this is what's going to happen. And our firm has been working on that for a long time in terms of what we call insight and analytics. I want to say that it actually is fundamentally, as organization, driven through all of the digital experience and all of the account work that we do. So there's no plan that doesn't start with all of that data. And is that kind of what you're looking for there, Willow?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
So I just want to let everybody know that you should go ahead and if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Melissa, I just want to turn a little bit and just spend a minute or two talking with you about the business that you run, the business that you manage, your own purpose-driven approach at We. You started your company on what you described as principles of innovation, respect, and absolute purpose. Mm-hmm. How did it inspire the founding of your company, and how does it shape it today, that notion of purpose?
It's a really great story for me to be able to tell, because I think that some of the early bets we made that were counterintuitive at the time actually have been the ones that have seen us through every part of the growth of our company. We did start with a fundamental purpose that was very simply put, and you actually at the front and introduction said this really well, which was basically use our gift of communications to move people to action, period, full stop. And so once we had that, and we had then the values that we set in stone, then all of us basically unified around that. So it's been from the very beginning. The other piece that has been from the very beginning is our people centricity. We are a fiercely independent company. We started that way, we're that way today, and we will continue to be that way forever. And because of that, we're able to make decisions that, again, are sometimes counterintuitive to just making a lot of money. And, I think that the people centricity in communications is incredibly important. That is who we are, and our points of view and our ability to express and tell stories. That is our chief asset in who we are. And so it's always played a fundamental role. I will say that diversity now I'm saying diversity, equity, and inclusion, D&I has always been part of our company, which is one of the most basic parts fundamentally of a purpose-driven company. Now with us, we started first in terms of gender balance and making sure my leadership team's 50-50, a male and female, and we started there. And then we added in LGBT and then Q and worked on that. And now, of course, as we all know, there's so much more there. That is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how you run a purpose-driven company. It's the makeup of your company first, the representation, and then, I think, more importantly, and I think you would agree with this too, Willow, after getting to know you a little bit, a purpose-driven company has to be a place where everyone belongs. And we celebrate our differences. So our employee survey, we have these goals of, how many of you do feel like you can belong and be yourself here. And we have a high rating of 82%, but we said every year, it's got to be higher, it's got to be higher. I won't be happy until it's 100%. Although my partners tell me I should say 98% because you're never perfect. So really, fundamentally, it's at the core of everything that we do, Willow. And I think it makes us who we are. And I think it's also what clients want. And for all of you out there, I encourage you to find a place where you can call it your own and you can feel like you belong. And when you, even enter the company the very first day, you should feel like this is my place.
Melissa, I'm going to turn now to one of our students who actually submitted bid to. I'm looking at you. You're actually right in front of me, sitting next to Melissa on my screen. So this is sort of perfect. You submitted several questions, but I'm thinking the last one that you submitted is sort of perfect right now. Do you have it in front of you to ask yourself, or do you want me to read it?
You can read it.
If you have it handy, it's great. Good. Unmute yourself. Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks,
yes.
Bintu.
Yeah. Hi, Dinbe. Hi, Melissa. Thank you for being here. So my question is, in the wake of the tragic death of George Floyd and spark in racial consciousness across the globe, how are your PR clients responding to the call for greater racial equity and opportunity, both from staff within and external calls from the broader community? Additionally, are there lessons learned from the advancement of women that can be offered as advice to this firm as they develop solutions in response to call for greater diversity and inclusion?
Oh, first of all, thank you for that question. I so appreciate that question. And it is fundamentally at the core of a lot of the changes I think that the entire business community needs to be looking at and making traction around. So I know it takes courage to ask that kind of question, and I so appreciate it. I believe that there has been an incredible, for a long time, as we all know, an incredible amount of injustices in the world. And I believe that communications can play a really big role. And I also believe fundamentally that the companies we work with want to play a big role in not just making sure that they behave against a set of values that include inclusion and diversity and the right representation, but also in the way they treat their own customers and in the way they build their products. And so we see that and have hope for that every single day. But as a company, we also know that they're not always yet quite organized in terms of how to go about DEI. So I have a group in my company who does just that, who advises and counsels on where to start, what to do, where a company might be today. And that's the real scalable change a company like mine, a community like we can make, because I have 1,200 people, so I can work with them to make a change. But if I can scale with my clients, like your question, then I can make a much greater impact. And so I see all of our clients, literally everyone, asking us what should be our strategy, how can we do better, and what are the things you see in our company. So that would be the first piece. And before I answer the part about women, I just want to checkpoint with you. Did that resonate with you?
Yes, thank you for thank you for responding. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like just in my own workplace, this is the first time I've seen like companies really taking a stand. So that's why I was curious about your PR clients, but I've seen that even here at USC, having like meetings and like at my work every week, and that's something like we didn't have before. So that's like a very good step moving forward.
I want to say here that there has been a lot of attention to this right now, but that at the same time, the most important aspect of all of this is sustainability. We cannot just think that we can make a few moves or appoint a diversity inclusion officer, all of that is important, but that is not the fundamental change we need to see here. The change we need to see here is that we fundamentally shift our cultures, and we fundamentally are always on this all day, every day, which is certainly the way I'm viewing our challenge. Now to the part of your question about women. There are many lessons learned about women in the workforce. When I started my company, there were none. I mean, we were the first women-owned and woman-run, and even in technology particularly, there were very few women. And I think the most fundamental learning for me was just find out what you're really good at and stick to it and believe in it and have confidence, but don't think you can do it alone. I think that women really need to look at one another, and this is a lesson we can all take, and say, how can we together actually make sure that we're helping one another, make sure that we're mentoring one another, make sure that fundamentally we're looking out for each other's success. And that's not just a woman's, not a lesson from the women piece, the question you're asking. It's a fundamental humanity question. None of us do as well on our own. And then the final thing I would say is around what I'd like to call empathy. I think that that's a lesson we all need in this world today, and women seem to naturally have that. So do men, and I would never take that away from them. But at the same time, women seem to naturally go to a place of, is there a way that I actually can make this situation better? Can I spend time trying to understand? And so that is something that I have learned, and that is why I have powerful women in our company today, because that is a lesson we can all take in business and in life, quite frankly. Did that answer that part of your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Professor Wexler, I'll get to your question in a little bit, but Melissa, I'm curious from your vantage point about this moment that we're living through, because you've made a number of really interesting observations. One is how important empathy is, and I think we're all in much closer touch with that right now, given what we're all sharing. Bintu, you also made an interesting point that you've never seen this kind of attention paid to not just diversity, equity and inclusion, critical issues, but also to the bringing people together. And And Melissa, I wonder, are there lessons learned around internal communication and the importance of internal communications at this particular moment that you've observed as a leader of a company and as an advisor to others?
I think that the employees, the people in a company are the backbone and the core of the company. And I truly believe fundamentally that if you're not in sync with all of them, you're not going to be running a very good company and you're not going to be making very good decisions. And employees are everything. And I have always made it a practice actually to see all the interns, to call into everybody, to talk to them about how you're doing. But your point is well taken that now I think our lack of ability to see one another in person has made the connections we need to keep and make, because there's both those we need to sustain and the new ones, even more difficult. And so there are many things that we do as a company that we've put in place. First and foremost, our establishment of employee resource groups. Those are powerful, powerful opportunities for employees who have, like consciousness and like almost, let's call them common thinking around something, and they truly want to have interaction with one another. That's something that every company should be doing, is figuring out who those resource groups are, what are the affinity groups that we should have, what are even the next ones down, because, again, people want that like-mindedness around them. I think the other thing is truly, we shouldn't get so anxious about communicating out all the time first. I think we should first make sure that our people are aligned with who we are, what we stand for, and that it's a two-way street. That I'm not just proclaiming this is who we are, but rather I'm going around and saying what will make this place a place that you're proud of. So that's a lesson, Willow, that we will take, because it's exacerbated now in terms of, the communications we need to keep and how we need to do our meetings and keep together on fundamental projects and or things that we're doing together as an organization. And so I think these times are actually, as horrible as they feel, are telling us that connection still is the main thing that we want from our workplace and from our home. And I would guess that between 20 and 30% of our people will now come back and say, I want an even more flexible working environment. You and I talked about this a little bit. We already have a very flexible working environment, but I think this work from home will teach people that if we really reach out, we can have connections as long as we build places for people to come.
And interesting thinking about how we rebalance time and effort and resources spent in what I'll call our communication portfolio, adjusting that external, internal prioritization to really reflect exactly what you're suggesting, that internally we need to be aligned, that our people are our most kind of critical element of who we are as a company.
And I have a comment on that too. I think if as a leader, if we get to a place where we're making a list of things to do and we write down, I need to make these 7 calls to these 7 people, that's not an authentic way to approach making communications work internally. I think we really fundamentally have to step back and say, who might be feeling more pain in their, particular position, and how can we as an organization think about extending in a variety of ways. And so what I'm saying by this is it can't be a list of things to do. And it just, okay, now because we're all working from home, I'm just going to call 7 people. People will see through that. People will want to have a true connection with you. They will want to have a project you're working on together, and they will want to have a role in that, and they will want to speak their piece. And so artificial, we would think that in today's, technology world, we could actually be a little more superficial. That's the opposite. Mm-hmm. Now is when we're all level set. There's no hierarchy. There's no, I've done this longer than you. We're all in it together. And so this is where authenticity matters, I think, the most.
Mm-hmm. And you've been very clear about the importance of authenticity. I learned a new term from you that I didn't before, purpose washing.
Oh, yes. And it's not a new term from me. I probably co-opted it from, the last few years. I think purpose washing is something that, probably stemmed from greenwashing, obviously, where at the bottom, at the kind of the bottom line, so to speak, is are you or are you not really purpose driven, or, are you just fooling me? And I would hope that people know and can see that, from the very start. And it does happen. But I think that we're moving, and this is, for me, really exciting, where businesses are moving now from a place where they know they'll be found out very, very quickly. And so just like that, they realize, well, there's just no way I can pull this off. I'm not even going to try. And that is a great place for us to be as communications professionals.
I got a great question in the chat. It was sent to me privately, so I don't know if that was intentional or by accident. And so if you sent it and want to out yourself, please unmute yourself and do, but I'll start to read it. Melissa, when communicating purpose internally, particularly in large organizations, is there a strategy or process you would recommend to best align everyone around the message?
Absolutely. However, I would say it starts fundamentally by the businesses really deciding they want to embark on the journey of discovery. Once that happens, though, you do need some rigor and discipline around how will you get really to that outcome. And that fundamentally starts by saying, what are we really, really doing in this world? And there are a number of exercises that you can go through as an individual and also as a company. I think first and foremost, though, it's a journey of discovery around, at the end of the day, the thing that we do moves this action, right? This is the thing we really want to change. This is the influence we want to have. This is the outcome we're looking for. And so there is that obvious place of just stay wallowing in that for quite some time with the right people. And the right people are not just the leadership team. The right people is a cross-section and a good representation of everyone in the company. And so that's where I would start. I fundamentally think the next step is focus. You have to get to a place where you say, is this something that we really can be focused on? And the next step is really, is this believable? And is this something we will invest in and commit to and take to scalability? And then I think the accountability thing we talked about is kind of that next step of how will we measure our success? How will we hold people accountable? How will we get people to align around it? And so as you can see, there's a set of steps now. Will there always be everyone entering at the exact same place? No. And we'd be very willing to have informal conversations with people too, if that's the place that they'd like to start. And thank you for that question, by the way. We have a team at our company, Corporate Reputation and Brand Purpose, that actually is very rigorous around that and has a process that we have been working with brands side by side with for quite some time, actually.
Gary, I'm glad you're there, because I'm going to go to your question. So, Melissa, I said hi to Professor Wexler earlier. I'll let you go ahead and unmute yourself and voice your own question and do your own introductions, Gary.
Thank you. Melissa, first of all, I want to be able to say to you that your authenticity in this presentation is so clear to everybody. And I just want, and when you talked about purpose washing, I just want to share with you a quick experience in class this semester. I don't know whether it's the pandemic or what, but when I show in class now campaigns or show different commercials or videos, the students have an ability this semester to see through and ask so many penetrating questions and not believe even the most extraordinary concepts. And so we're seeing this ability now. And so I think you are right on the spot here when you're talking about this. And you yourself come off so clear and transparent and not spinning yourself. And I've seen this with a lot of people who have come to class that do that, and the students see through it. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is you're welcome. I have three things to say to you. Our students are all looking for jobs. And I try to be as helpful as can be in helping them understand the importance of networking in building their networks. So I just want to tell you that I tell my students, everybody who comes to classes and speaks, or everybody you meet, I will open up a door for you to networking. So my students who are here, you will reach out to Melissa and talk to her and make her part of your network. So I just want to introduce them. Turn on your cameras. Bintu, wave. How you, Nelton Wu, wave. Okay, hold on a second on the next screen.
This is great.
Okay, Lisa Michelle, wave. Turn on your camera, Lisa. She's down in the corner there. Hold on. Lisa, you there with your camera? Maybe you're not. Ashley, get ready to turn on your camera too. Okay, anyway, regardless, these students will be reaching out to you and I will push them to do this. And I also promised them I would introduce them to Dean Bay, who some of them don't know as well. The other thing I want to say to you, my next semester's class is the one that's on nonprofit advocacy and marketing and communication. And I want you to come and speak in class several times, and Zoom allows that. So I am networking with you at this point. You'll be hearing from me, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I respond to you, please?
Sure.
First, again, a huge thank you for those kind words. And I think I'll just spend the rest of my career trying to live up to them, honestly. On the second piece, and I think the people in Annenberg know this about me. They do send people our way all the time, and they actually do get through to me. I actually do talk to them. And I'm sure I'm hurried sometimes. I'm sure I'm just like, whoa, but I do take those calls. I couldn't believe more firmly that we have got to make people want to come to this industry and understand the changes that we can actually make. And so I'm glad that you all feel that way too. And so, yeah, call me. And then the final thing about speaking, I'm sure I would.
Did you all hear that? She said, call her. Make sure you do this.
I did. And I have someone in Fred Cook who actually will verify that, because he laughs all the time. He goes, oh, I see you had a conversation. And yes, I did have a conversation. I do want to say there that during the pandemic, and I will then come to the part about your class, it's really hard as a CEO to understand what we're going to do with what if the revenue went down? What about all this uncertainty? And I first and foremost said, we will not lose any jobs to COVID, as a pandemic related. It just won't happen. Your jobs are secure. And because we're independent, we can do that. And I'm bringing this up because I saw in the industry a lot of intern programs got, kind of set aside. And we had to also take 2 months hiatus from our interns programs, and now it's back on. And so I feel really good about that, because it's kind of bucking a trend in the industry. First of all, that we're continuing to hire, and we are protecting jobs, and that's incredibly important. And again, being independent can help us there. But also that we are still selectively hiring in places where we really need to. So again, on your number 2 point, do give me a call. And on the third, well, I think I would say to you, I am happy to come and talk, and as long as you promise me that I get a chance to learn from the students too. People who know me understand that as soon as the interns come in, that's a meeting I have, and they don't just get to sit there and hear about me and us and the company. I need to hear from them. So as long as you promise me that back, I'm good.
So let me just say one thing to you about that. At this age in my life and at this point in my career, teaching these students has opened up doors for me because of what I learned in ways I could never have anticipated. So thank you to all of you.
Nice.
Very, very right back at all of you. No question about that.
Professor Wexler, we're lucky to have you. I'm just going to interrupt this scheduled programming for a brief promotional announcement. I may have to use my phone in a ham-handed way. My podcast, PR Future, that's Fred Cook's podcast, produced by one of our students, Zazu Lippert. This season is on the new activism, and the next episode up, I believe, is going to feature Melissa. I'm pretty sure you're the next one up. So I know that it's going to be fantastic. But for those of you who don't listen to this, please put it on, please get it off of, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, because it is fantastic. And Melissa, I'm super excited. I've been checking kind of every week or so to see when yours is going to be released, because I know yours is going to be fantastic. But it is a really, I think, compelling look at the future of the industry through the lens of this theme. So I highly recommend it to everybody.
Fred asked a question about, do I consider myself an activist? And I actually had to pause a little bit, because I thought, He's asking that because he can't see I am. And that in itself is a problem. Can you, it's a behavioral thing, right? And it's a habit that it means that you're all the time, always thinking about things that need to get better. And so that's the answer that I kind of struggled with a little bit in terms of, wow, I guess because he asked, I think I should try harder. And that's kind of how I left the podcast is, yes, we all should try harder.
I also want to point out that Andrea Holt, everybody check in the chat, put an update on Melissa around WE's intern program. So, we just have a couple more minutes left, and you've been incredibly generous with your time and your wisdom. Is there any advice that you would like to leave with our students for how to navigate this time filled with opportunity that may not be always obvious and challenges that are certainly front and center?
There's probably more than you want to hear, but I think about a little toy that my daughter had, which was a wind-up corgi dog. And when you wound it up, it ran into a wall, but then it bounced back and went another direction. And it was always hitting its head on the wall. And every single time you'd see it turn around and it would still go. And actually, that's my advice. I mean, I don't know that we know everything that's happening in the future, but we do know that we have each other. We do know that we have our intelligence. We do know that we will come out on the other end. And so I just pause on the word resiliency, like the little dog, and say, so when you get hit on one side, you have to turn around to the next side, and you have to take the learning with you, and yet you have to know that there will be another thing you run into. And so here's my advice first and foremost. I think that, we have to start fundamentally with who we are and why we do what we do. I would actually encourage you to do that exercise for yourselves. Write it down. Why do I fundamentally want to be in communications? What change do I really hope I can make? And so there's that piece of starting with your purpose. The second thing, and that's also a values piece too, in terms of knowing what you stand for and that line in the sand that you will never cross. The second is what I said before about build the epic, not the episode. You will make mistakes. I actually think we should revel and celebrate in our mistakes, learn from them, pick ourselves up, and get going again. The third is around not doing it alone. And Willow, you know this too. And this is a reason for your success with it. You're not just in front of the camera as you've been many times. You're there with many people. You might be the pointy tip of it, but many people are there. And I would just urge us all to look at our neighbor, look across at the place that, well, I guess it's hard to do that now, but, and make sure that we are surrounding ourselves with really smart people and that we know we can never, ever do things alone. We're much stronger together. And I guess the final thing would be, and especially for you coming into this industry now, I think we all need a point of view. And I think when we're new or we're an introvert, we're a little worried about our point of view and will it be good and will it be perfect? And I think I'll wait till I get it perfect. Don't do that. Blurt it out and make sure that people know that you're sincere and that you're willing to take feedback if someone says, what was that? But that's the place we have to get to as people, is that what we have inside in our heads and our hearts matters, and be sure that we express it. And I think that those would be my pieces of advice.
Great advice, but let me follow up on your last bit, the blurted out piece.
Yeah.
It is increasingly fraught to blurt it out, right? It becomes at this moment. And so I noticed you centered that in the, it comes from a sincere place, and in that way, a values-driven place. But how do you think about wrestling with that balance of blurt it out, seize the moment, right, to speak, versus this is a moment where we need to be very thoughtful and careful and intentional about our choice of words.
Completely. I also think as well that we all need to spend a lot of time learning about everything from micro, aggressions to, just what really is happening in a certain community. When something happens which might not happen in this community, that other community might not take it that way. But that's really not how I was stating that, as much as your point of view. I think that when you're talking with people, everything you do needs to be rooted in 360 degrees of respect, of course. That said, though, it is important for you to go on record, and it's important for the person to say back, that did not feel good. And then your job is to say, why not? And to understand and to listen. And so I don't know that we can be so overly thoughtful and careful and perfectionist that we try to be, make it perfect every time. I think we have to be who we are and learn from those around us. So people around us also need to say, that did not feel good. And my job is to say, and thank you. Thank you. I will do it better, and tell me more. Tell me more. So you're right. It's a balance. But I encourage students especially to know what's in their heart and their brain and what they want to do and how they'd like to give advice and counsel, and to just be true and real with that. This is what I can offer. Here's my value, and I'm going to say it. Does that resonate with you?
Melissa, I'm so happy I asked you that second piece of the question, because yeah, I think that was phenomenally helpful. I see Bintu smiling and nodding. That worked for you, Bintu? Good. Good, thank you. Melissa, I'm gonna send you on your way with our deepest appreciation and thanks. Everybody can unmute and say thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really, it was great.
Thank you, Melissa.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank all of you. Thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. It was fun. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do it again. It sounds like we will.
And we would love that, and we would love to keep up to date on Microsoft and how they're progressing as well, and how your plan is progressing with them.
Very good. Thank you very much, Willow. Such an honor to spend time with you. Hope we get to do it again.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.